Hello and welcome to today's edition of DisBar, the Florida Bar. I'm your host, Les Winston. I'm with you every day from 2 to 3 p.m. here on The Biz every weekday. This program is dedicated to discussing the issues that victims of the Florida Bar's corruption bring to the table. We have been airing these programs for several months. We have brought to light the stories of so many victims, it's hard to keep track of them, who have been affected by corruption at the top of the Florida Bar. My guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein. Eliot was a former guest on the show, and the reason for my return visit with Eliot is to get caught up to date a little bit more on what's going on from his perspective. How are you, Eliot?
Hi, Les.
It's good to talk with you again. I've been following your Iviewit Technologies site, and I certainly would implore anybody who is interested in this topic to go and visit Iviewit Technologies. What is the actual site? It's iviewit.com?
Iviewit.tv.
Iviewit.tv. How long have you had that site?
Since 2002 or 3.
And what do you filter through there? What do you put through that site?
I put through the basic information about the inventions I invented, and then I put through quite a bit of the investigatory, the bar issue, the court issues that we've had to, as a company, deal with to try to get our patents back from the dirty, rotten attorneys, judges, and prosecutors who have aided and abetted to steal the technologies and convert the royalties to themselves.
You've likened them to the invention of electricity.
Les, I didn't liken them to anything. Senior engineers from Lockheed, Intel, Silicon Graphics, Warner Brothers, AOL, their terms were digital electricity, the holy grail, distributing video at full screen, full frame rate at low bandwidth through the internet was deemed the search for the holy grail. So solving that obviously led them to call my technology the holy grail. But they're so profound, they affect everything that has to do with digital imaging and video, every piece of hardware, every piece of software. They're more important than the operating system. At this point, there are estimates that over 90% of the internet driver is video and imaging. And if that's true, then I'm the guy responsible for that on both ends of the imaging. And then you take the technologies through the medical science on telescopes, etc. And the applications are never ending, actually. And so the royalty streams are hard to count, actually.
To recover what you've lost.
I haven't lost anything, by the way, Les.
Okay.
Let me be clear. The attorneys have stolen the patents to cause enough that they're in suspension at the patent office, and what's happening is a royalty is inuring for me. Right now, the attorneys are out there through the MPEG patent pool they created and control. My attorneys, who were supposed to be patenting my inventions for me, patented them under their patent pool and have been really illegally charging all these companies through the MPEG patent pooling scheme that Kenneth Rubenstein of Proskauer Rose, my lawyers, developed, and then put my technology into their patent pool and blocked me out of the market and tried to kill me with a car bomb and all those kind of things we've discussed. But in the end, Les, everybody, if tomorrow I get my patents approved, Warner Brothers will owe me 10 years of back pay, and I'm the biggest driver of their company.
Is anybody getting paid now?
Yeah, MPEG. These guys have made a fortune. Yeah. So the lawyers have ripped off all these people, claiming that it was their technology. And so all of these people are still going to have to pay me 10 years of back pay like any inventor and an ongoing forward royalty. And the numbers, people have estimated it to be $1 trillion. I have a lawsuit that's $1 trillion in a federal court associated legally related by a federal judge, Shira, Scheindlin, to a whistleblower in New York. So, these are very serious numbers. But, that's all payable to me. Now, whatever MPEG charged Warner Brothers will have remedy to go to MPEG and say, we're suing you for all the money you ripped us off. You knew you stole somebody's invention, and you charged us, and you didn't tell us, hey, if he gets his inventions, you might owe him too. Mm-hmm. And lawyers are going to have a big problem. In fact, I'm going to offer everybody on my licenses a 10 to 15% discount if they will sue MPEG eternally, and they can have a haircut on the license when they eventually have to settle up with the true and proper inventors.
Okay, who are the rogues in this matter? Who are the rogue attorneys and who are the rogue judges? Who do you believe are the rogues that have done this?
Your initial rogue lawyer is Albert Gortz and Christopher Wheeler here in Boca Raton, Florida. They were first on the scene of my invention at Proskauer Rose.
What's their names?
Albert Gortz.
Gortz, Gortz.
Gortz.
TZ, okay.
And Christopher Clark Wheeler. Mm-hmm. And those were the first two guys on the scene. They were the first guys to hear the Holy Grail out of Hassan Mia's mouth, who Hassan was the Intel CAA.
And what did they do?
Well, what they did right from the start, and what we learned is Chris Wheeler was involved in a prior patent attempted theft from a Florida businessman, Monty Friedkin. Mm-hmm. And he brought his crew right into my company. So these guys were a well-oiled machine prior to getting to my patents. But they had just come off a heist that went terribly wrong for them, and it involved Chris Wheeler and a gentleman. These were the gentlemen at Monty Friedkin who came over to my company. Mm-hmm. They brought in another guy from Foley and Lardner out of Milwaukee. Well, he was in Palm Beach. His name was William Dick. The law firm Foley and Lardner is out of Milwaukee.
So let's go back for a second. Albert Gortz and Christopher Clark Wheeler, what did they actually do to your claims or to your rights that you can say here's the evidence that they did this?
Well, here's what they did. Let me go through that whole part I was taking you through.
Okay.
I think it'll clarify your question. Mm-hmm. So the three prior people to Monty Friedkin's theft of patents, which is going to happen almost identically at my company, was Chris Wheeler, and these were identified by Friedkin, and then Bill Dick, who was at Foley and Lardner. Now, Dick was prior to Foley and Lardner IBM's Far Eastern Patent Counsel. Mm-hmm. And the third person at Friedkin's was a gentleman, Brian Utley, who was the plant manager or something, or the janitor probably, at IBM here. And he and Wheeler were very good friends, sit on the Florida Atlantic University, board together with Friedkin, in fact.
Okay.
And which is an interesting piece of history. And
so was there a conflict of interest that was established by these prior relationships?
No. What happened was, there's a criminal background. That's the first thing to establish. That these three who are going to end up in my company have a prior attempted theft of intellectual property from another Florida businessman right before me, of which they alter Brian Utley's resume to lie. Actually, when we handed it to Friedkin, he confirmed that the whole story Utley said about helping his company through his inventions was all lies. When he caught them stealing patents, he took a business loss, closed down his company, Diamond Turf Manufacturing or Diamond Turf Equipment, and he closed it down and took a loss and because he had caught them stealing intellectual property. Okay. Now, they didn't put that in Utley's resume when Wheeler handed it out to the Iviewit, my company's board.
Was that a criminal background that was known in the courts? It was public information or what?
No, Friedkin had fired him and closed down his company on the spot. Now, when Wheeler gave me Utley's resume to hire Utley, on his resume it said Diamond Turf Equipment had gone on to be a great success. But what really happened was, when we checked with Friedkin after the fact, after we learned they were stealing patents, and we'll get to that in a minute.
So Wheeler misled you regarding Utley's background.
Oh, and Bill Dick, when they brought him in, and I'll explain where that comes in a minute. So the first step that they did, Wheeler, was to say that Proskauer had patent counsel in New York, which they didn't.
Okay.
Prior to my inventions, Proskauer had no IP department. For
was that documented that he said that Proskauer had patent experience?
Yes.
Okay.
And even more bizarre is he learned of my invention. He said he would check with their New York Patent Counsel, and then he disappeared for a few weeks. And I'm calling him every day, and I got people lining up for investment and wanting to know what's going on with my lawyer. And when he came back, he said, our patent counsel, Kenneth Rubenstein, is a guy who put together this patent pool, the MPEG patent pool. Okay. Well, right there, we started telling everybody, Proskauer got Kenneth Rubenstein as our patent counsel.
Okay.
And we've now retained Proskauer and Rubenstein.
Okay.
Rubenstein brought in his lackey, Raymond, Joao, the guy who will eventually put 90 patents in his own name, all to do with inventions learned from me, or mostly. And he might have been stealing from some of his other clients, too. And I'm sure they were, because this looks like a well-greased machine. Like I said, they have, for RICO, it's important to establish that they have priors in this. Okay.
My guest, hold on a second. My guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein of Iviewit.TV, Iviewit Technologies, and we're talking about the patents and how he was defrauded out of his patents by rogue attorneys. So the first rogue attorney on the scene is actually Christopher Clark Wheeler, who misleads you about the backgrounds of these people that he's bringing into your inner circle.
Absolutely.
Okay. Did you report? Is that part of your claim?
Oh, absolutely.
No, but is that part of the claim that you made to the Florida bar?
Absolutely, with the evidence.
Okay.
Because what happens next is, and I can't remember if it was Goldman Sachs or Grunzel, one of the due diligence people that was looking at investment came back and said, "Hey, what are you telling people that Ken Rubenstein is with Proskauer Rose? He's with a firm, Meltzer Lippy." And so we called Wheeler, and this is all documented in the complaints with the Florida bar, in the complaints everywhere. And we contacted Wheeler and said, what are you doing? You're telling us that this guy works for you, but he works for some other law firm, and now we've got investors who have verified that. I made calls to Proskauer. They had no Ken Rubenstein.
So this is very simple, cut and dry, clearly evidenced claim that Wheeler has misrepresented to you the attorney that he is bringing into this as representing Proskauer and Rose, when in fact he belongs to another law firm.
Oh, and absolutely. And if you listen to Ken Rubenstein's deposition or read the transcript up at my site, he suddenly has a brain flurb. And imagine a lawyer or a litigator of a firm like this forgetting his date of employment with Proskauer. He can't remember. He doesn't know the terms of his contract with Proskauer.
Okay.
Under deposition, he keeps saying he's going to answer that when he returns, but he never returns.
So it's clear that he didn't, and it wasn't part of Proskauer at the time. So when you made that complaint to the Florida bar, is that the first complaint you made to them?
Well, it was the first part of the story.
Yeah. Okay. No, I realize there's more.
Several thousand pages long.
Right, I realize that, but in the early stage of what you uncovered, you started with that with the bar. Was that the first thing you sent to the bar? Do you know?
Yeah. The first thing was a well. By the time I got to the Florida bar, I had information that was, I had just filed a counter complaint in the Labarga court in West Palm, and so we had filed a counter complaint alleging conspiracy. We had a lot of information and evidence on these guys right here. Okay, so now not only have you filed a complaint with the Florida bar alleging these, now you are in federal court. Federal court? No, this was in
State
West
Circuit
Palm
Court.
Beach Civil Circuit. Judge Jorge Labarga.
Okay,
and through the Bush election.
Okay, so now you have filed a lawsuit against them alleging these very things. Is that right? In a federal court, and it's been related legally by federal Judge Shira Scheindlin to a whistleblower. Okay, but I'm saying, going back to the Labarga court, the Labarga... I'm suing Labarga in the federal court in New York. I'm suing the Florida bar. I'm suing, God knows, all of the Supreme Court guys. Right. The clerk of that court, pretty much the president of the Florida bar, Kelly Overstreet Johnson, several of the officers of that court who lied, who got caught in conflicts,
who got, Kelly Overstreet Johnson, was working for Chris Wheeler's brother, James Wheeler, while she was handling all of my information.
So she had a conflict of interest that was undisclosed.
No, that's not a conflict, is it? Les, I mean, no. Here in Florida, where there is no conflict.
No such thing as conflicts of interest, right?
Right,
absolutely. Not for these people, but it is for anybody else.
In a lawless legal system, there is, that's the key, the glue that binds this whole thing is conflict. If all of these people had to adhere to conflict laws, this would never happen. But the fact that they can pick up the phone and it's a good old boy network, there's the conflict.
Right,
So James Wheeler, who's at another law firm, Broad and Cassell, he's got the girl at the top covering up the Wheeler complaint. I mean, Chris Wheeler gets in a drunk driving, and the Florida bar, Eric Turner, goes into the press and says that the Florida bar isn't going to do anything. It was a misdemeanor. Well, factually, it wasn't a misdemeanor. It was a felony because he injured somebody and left him in the car while he was wasted, and his wife was there telling the police that he was wasted. It's all in the police report up at my website. If you click on the first picture of Chris Wheeler, you'll see.
Okay,
the police report pops up. But the point is, why is the Florida bar stepping into the news? And this is coming out in like the Palm Beach Post. And covering for Wheeler, because they would have had to start investigating him on the felony issue, and they would have disbarred him on a felony.
And why is Wheeler not disbarrable? What is? Well,
now he's taken early retirement from Proskauer, and one of the key architects of the block of due process, not only in the New York disciplinary, but here in the Florida disciplinary for Proskauer, Stephen Crane, who was he also was one of the heads of the ABA as well, and thought to be one of the leading people in ethics, just died on me before I could prosecute him. But he died at 53 after eating lunch, and he was a very heavy-set, greed, gluttonous person. But and he's one of the key architects of destabilizing these bars. I mean, he's the guy that was put in New York and in the national, and then through Florida. They started changing laws, really changing the bar to protect attorneys, meaning the whole bar system is an attorney protection agency. The fact that I gave them evidence and the people who handled my complaint handled it illegally, meaning, in fact, the people who represented Proskauer in the Florida bar were other Proskauer partners who were officers of the Florida bar.
They were board of governors? They were on the board of governors?
Right. And one of those things.
Okay.
But they were under, and I have it on confirmation from the bar, that they were in a blackout period, this gentleman, Matthew Triggs of Proskauer Rose, when he handled the bar complaint. He also, by the way, was conflicted from handling the bar complaint because he was also the Proskauer attorney in the Labarga court at the simultaneous time.
So the whole thing is nepotism and just everybody is
in conflicts.
In conflicts,
But Les, when you're a victim of a lawyer and you think you're going to go get restitution from the bar, when you send your information to the bar, they allow the attorney you're complaining of to not only view the information you're putting up against them, which is unlike any other investigation, but to actually handle the information. And this is how you get nowhere. And they've got a whole system, again, it seems very well architected, to diffuse complaints top down. And, these guys, Kenneth Marvin, we have one guy, I can't remember, John Anthony Boggs.
Yeah, Anthony Boggs. Yeah, I'm going to put a pin through that, okay? John Anthony Boggs, we'll talk about him when we come back. I want to take a short commercial break. My guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein. Eliot made a complaint against attorney Christopher Clark Wheeler to the Florida bar. The complaint was voluminous in great detail with complete evidence provided, and the Florida bar's response to all of that was no action.
No, it was cover-up.
Cover-up, not only no action, but covering up what the situation was. They now had the blueprint of what happened, and they could work backwards to cover it up. We'll be back with Eliot Bernstein. Don't go away. This is DisBar, the Florida Bar. We're with you every weekday here from 2 to 3 right on the Biz. And I want to remind you that the programs do stream live on DisBarTheFloridaBar.com. This is a corporate entity that is a 501c4 corporate entity which can and should be supported by public funds. And we're asking you, if you would, go to the website and contribute to the support of this program. This is a very important program for not only the citizens of Florida or South Florida and Florida, but also citizens around the country who are also being affected in other places by out-of-control bar associations and attorneys who are taking advantage as rogues. Not only are there rogue attorneys, but there are rogue judges. When we come back from our short commercial break, we're going to talk to Eliot Bernstein further, attorneys involved in his case, and rogue judges, as well as those rogues who are part of the Florida bar's makeup. We'll be right back. My name is Les Winston, and I host DisBar, the Florida Bar, right here on the Biz in South Florida. In Florida, all other professionals except lawyers are governed by the Department of Business and Professional Regulation.
And increasingly, people are coming to this conclusion that the judicial branch of government is itself the most dangerous branch of government.
There's a system out of control. There's no more check and balance.
Only lawyers regulate themselves through the Florida Bar. This has created a very dangerous good old boys club and a lot of rotten apples.
Yeah, they tell the other branches what they can do.
The United States Trustees Program is the largest organized criminal element in the world.
They allowed somebody to put a bomb in my car and attempt to murder my 3 children.
If some real investigative writer were to ever do a study on which lawyers were ever disciplined and for what, and which ones were not, I think they'd see that there are certain members of the bar that are favored over others. Tune in each weekday from 2 o'clock to 3 p.m. and listen to stories of individuals who have been affected by the corruption of the Florida bar. We want you to be aware of the problem that we have with this disciplinary agency. Join us every weekday, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. right here on The Biz. And we're back. My guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein. Eliot is the inventor of technology which has been likened to digital electricity in the sense that it has allowed all of the things that we see now in the digital world, the amazing ability of seeing full video and it's a little bit beyond me, Eliot, but I know that the technology is extremely powerful and was extremely valuable, and this was stolen from you by the patent attorneys that were involved in helping you to patent this, actually, who recognized the value of this. And you did file a complaint very early on against attorneys, one in particular, Christopher Clark Wheeler. You provided the evidence to the Florida Bar. The Florida Bar not only didn't do anything about it, they helped to cover up the problem to protect all of the relationships. And that's what happens here. It's like, you uncover a very small thread of the problem, and as you get closer and closer to the spool, you start to understand how it involves so many different facets and so many different angles of this entity, the Florida Bar, and the attorneys who are rogue attorneys and judges who help those rogue attorneys. And the reason behind it always comes down to the greed factor. There's money involved, and in this case, huge amounts of money, which you are still working to recover and will hopefully be successful. So, Eliot, we were talking before the break about John Anthony Boggs. What was his relationship to the bar at the time?
Well, he was their chief counsel or something, or he was under Marvin. I don't recall his exact title. I had complained about Matthew Triggs, who was from Proskauer. We caught him violating his public office. He was in a blackout period where he couldn't represent anyone before the bar, and instead he's representing his partners. Also, while in a civil litigation simultaneously with us, which also is a conflict under the Florida Bar rules. Mm-hmm. So I complained about Triggs, and the Florida Bar refused to formally docket the complaint as required by the Constitution of Florida. They would not intake it because it was a pure factual conflict. They would have had admonished. It would have started the onion peeling for me right there. Mm-hmm. So Boggs and Marvin were called in for the cover-up.
Mm-hmm. How did they cover it up?
Well, for example, when what we found out on Wheeler next, when we contacted the president of the Florida Bar, Johnson, Kelly Overstreet Johnson, mm-hmm. She was handling the information. And, everything was get back to you and all that. And she was handling the information without telling us that she was working for Chris Wheeler, who we originally complained of his brother, brought in Cassell. And so we discovered that conflict. Then we went to Marvin, who called saying that Kelly Overstreet Johnson wouldn't be, or it might have been Boggs, called and the Florida Bar called and said that she wouldn't be handling anything further. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm. But they wouldn't take my complaint against her. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't file my complaint against Triggs. Mm-hmm. And so Boggs, in fact, to cover up for Triggs, once we caught Triggs violating his public office, instead of them forcing Triggs to respond, the Florida Bar actually responded for him, mm-hmm. as if they were his lawyers. John Anthony Boggs responded by citing a code of law that wasn't codified yet, mm-hmm. meaning it was a draft that he had just drafted several nights earlier, we later learned. And trying to say that had Triggs contacted the Florida Bar, he could have gotten approval. And we call it the he coulda, shoulda, woulda, because mm-hmm. even if that rule was real, mm-hmm. he still had never contacted anybody, told him of his conflict and his prohibition. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, great, he could have, he would have, he should have, but he didn't. Mm-hmm. So it's a conflict still. And so they completely stonewalled me. Mm-hmm. And that led me to call the Florida Supreme Court, where Deborah Yarborough told me to file a complaint after, we confirmed that Triggs was, definitely in conflict, mm-hmm. and that the Florida Bar wouldn't take a complaint according to the Constitution. They have to, formally take in the complaint at least and docket it.
Right.
But they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do Triggs. They wouldn't do Marvin. We complained about this guy Turner, and they wouldn't formally docket that. They turned it into an employee complaint.
Right.
And,
yeah, they have a trick and a solution to every single attempt to unravel the onion, to uncover, to get to the center.
Down.
Yeah,
it's top down. And let me tell you, when somebody's about to do the right thing, like this first person we contacted, Lorraine Christine Hoffman.
Yeah,
she might have originally been wanting to do the right thing, mm-hmm. and it sure sounded like she was going to.
Yeah,
and then she's replaced. And then, it looks like she writes this letter, under a gun. And Eric Turner's letter looks like somebody had a shotgun to his head. Uh-huh. Because it's illegible. It's not even written in proper English if you read it.
Okay.
It's one of the funniest letters you'll ever read, written by the bar. And that was in response to the Florida Supreme Court's request mm-hmm. to respond to my complaint. Mm-hmm. But you're right. They've got a whole.
So let's. What I would really be interested in doing is taking those excerpts from those Florida Bar letters where they use the language, this Mickey Mouse language that they use to stop you from going any further. They make up their own rules, or they call it something that it's not. I mean, they use fee disputes. They use every single thing that you could possibly come up with.
Oh, they say you're in civil litigation, even though you're not.
Yeah, or you're a disgruntled. That's their favorite word. Oh, you're just a disgruntled guy. Who's disgruntled with his attorney's results. You're disgruntled with the outcome of the. Yeah, you're disgruntled because you were screwed by rogues. You have a right to be disgruntled.
Well, and I had very serious evidence. I had evidence that the Proskauer guys had perjured themselves to a court. Absolute evidence of perjury of Rubenstein. Mm-hmm. That I was taking to these guys. But then here is the fact. Then they hand that information to the people you're complaining about.
Right.
And now that guy's involved in the complaint process, got access to the bar files you're filing.
Right.
So, I mean, that's like...
Well, they're not a prosecutorial agency. And did you ever take it to the FBI or take it to...
oh, absolutely. All of it.
And what do they do?
Well, the FBI... Definitely, they've lost my file, including the car bombing files, which led me to the Inspector General of the FBI, Glenn Fine, mm-hmm. and he's assigned some people here in Miami mm-hmm. and elsewhere to the case, mm-hmm. and they explained to me that the kind of crime I was explaining of law firms that had infiltrated the government in almost a coup on various states. Now perhaps the federal government, mm-hmm. That kind of investigation would take time.
Yeah.
They haven't blown, they haven't
said no.
They haven't closed, right, exactly.
And they won't tell you if it's an ongoing investigation.
They don't call you and say they're not your buddies in this.
No.
But much different than where the Florida Bar is writing these letters, there wasn't anything here.
Yeah.
They're you're in a civil case, so we don't handle it, even though their own rules say that it doesn't matter if you're in a civil case.
But they write you that letter, and it sends you back another 3 months.
But don't you find
go read more car laws?
Don't you find it amazing that the FBI will always say to you, "We can't tell you if there's an investigation," yet they publish. I've seen published reports from Florida Bar where they're quoting Florida Bar officers saying the FBI is investigating, where they can say that the FBI is investigating, and the FBI says there is no investigation because we can't tell you there's an investigation. So how do they know? How do they know the FBI is investigating? I mean, how?
Well, I know they're investigating.
You know?
Yeah, sure, I know they are, because if they aren't, then Glenn Fine and a whole lot of people who started these investigations a bunch of years ago are in a world of shit. I mean, they better have a big old fat file called Iviewit in the end with car bombing and with what they were doing on the scene of a car bombing and the evidence that they extracted from me over meetings, etc. And they better have been doing something, or else they're going to be included in the RICO.
Well, how do you find out if they do have that file?
I don't want to.
Okay.
Actually.
All right, but I'm saying
right now the truth is, Les, that if they gave that to me, I think personally it would endanger a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, I realize that, but what,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
That would be because I would use it prior to them having a completed case, obviously.
Right. Well,
if they get to the end of this and say, "Oh, we didn't do anything for the last 7 years while we had all this information," then I'm charging them with criminal obstruction.
With
because
is that
they
honest?
do have obligations and duties. Meaning, this went to the U.S. Attorney in Florida by the West Palm Beach FBI. Almost 5 years ago. So, they better all have some explanations of what's transpired.
Yeah.
And,
So our hope, because other cases that I know of and cases that I'm involved in, we've also gone to the FBI with them, and we don't know what the status of that is. Not that we're supposed to know, because they tell you that they won't tell you if there's anything. They won't discuss it with you. But
and by the way, Les, we're not coming into the FBI saying this guy's writing bad checks.
No, I know.
Okay, that by the way takes 3 years.
Right.
I'm going in saying that our government's been overthrown by these lawyers.
Right.
That they've infiltrated. Look at New York, where the whistleblower.
Yeah.
She came into a federal court and said that favored law firms and lawyers were getting their attorney disciplinary complaints whitewashed. That the New York Attorney General was illegally representing in her case the state defendants and failing to do his investigation of public officials for a whistleblower, and had failed to call anybody in to do that, obstructing justice. She then said that the U.S. attorneys in New York were getting complaints whitewashed by the disciplinary department, and that the district attorney and the assistant district attorney's complaints. Now, that's a coup right there.
Right.
You've disabled the ethics department in New York, which then subsequently disabled the ethics complaints that would have come in against the attorney general, the district attorney. And so you've got a criminal organization operating inside of the court or the prosecutorial. And now, as you see the grander picture in America, these lawyers have infiltrated the regulatory bodies, deregulated. And who's benefiting from all these crimes, TARP and everything else? Lawyers,
yeah, for the most part.
And anybody who complains against them go into this Florida bar system, which is an attorney protection agency.
Right.
And it's a criminal organization has infiltrated the key components of government. That criminal organization is those favored law firms and lawyers that Christine Anderson, the whistleblower, came out in federal court under Judge Shira Scheindlin and fingered. Said, this is what's going on here. This is why nobody's getting justice. Look, there's a lady who's raped by her lawyer, and she's one of the related cases, like my Iviewit case, to the whistleblower by the judge. And, now recently she's gotten some justice. He got disbarred for 3 months.
That's it?
Please. But that's okay.
Yeah, at least there was something that happened that's supposed to happen.
And now the civil stuff that's going to happen to him.
Yeah.
And the criminal stuff that,
right.
It could have been 3 days suspension, and she could have jumped up and down for joy. Because for years she's been stonewalled.
Right.
And until the whistleblower came out, until the federal judge. Now,
but let's be clear, though. This is New York, not Florida, folks.
Well, no. Wrong. Meaning Christine Anderson did not disclose who the favored lawyers and law firms are.
Okay.
Let's assume that it's Proskauer.
Okay.
Or Foley.
Okay.
They all have offices here. Hell, the Solicitor General of Florida was a Foley and Lardner partner. God knows why.
Okay, but my point...
And he's now got a special post inside Charlie Crist's cabinet. So he was brought in to block my complaints, block things at the Supreme Court level. And so what's going on here is not just the Florida bar. The Florida bar is the thing that's protecting the attorneys. There might be hundreds of complaints for criminal activity against the Attorney General here in Florida that are getting the same whitewash treatment. We find the same conflicts occurring in New York and Florida. I have personally found the same exact conflicts where people are violating public offices, getting in and getting their complaint information, handling it illegally to get rid of it. And so you've got the same problem. So I think really what you've seen is that it's started in New York. It's spread to probably a few major cities through these large law firms. And look, it's the same law firm, for example, in all these regulatory failures. You'll see that in Madoff, the regulator is from Proskauer Rose. In the Stanford case, the regulator is the former SEC enforcement dude. Tom Slobjam is in a Miami hangar teaching the Stanford employees how to lie to investigators. Where was Slobjam? He was at the Fort Worth office of the SEC where Stanford was buried. Then he was hired by Proskauer, and his client was Stanford. So it's a revolving door of these lawyers into government posts. Wherever they need to block due process, they throw in a lawyer. Greenberg Traub, take a look, from Abramoff down the line. These guys represent the Florida bar when they have conflicts against their former customers. Meaning they were actually patent counsel of mine, and now they're representing the Florida bar in the New York federal case.
So, right now in Florida, there's the election that's coming up. The Supreme Court justices, there's several of them that are on there. One is Labarga, candidate Polston. They are asking for the public's approval of them for them to stay in office. What would you say?
Well, I'm suing Kennedy and Labarga.
Okay.
And so Labarga's, they're both in $1 trillion lawsuit. They've involved the Florida bar. They've put a lot of liability on the state of Florida and the insurance company behind the Florida bar. When this all gets resolved, they've maybe done cataclysmic damage to the bar and the Supreme Court's insurance company, as well as the state, if it's found to have been part of actually architecting this inside the state. I don't know exactly how all that plays out, but Jorge Labarga is going to be, a central part. He's one of the key components to the RICO I've filed.
Don't they have to disclose that they're defendants in this kind of a lawsuit?
Sure, I would assume he has to, but, they're not doing anything by the rules. These are criminals inside, meaning if we assume that these are criminal law firms planting inside government, these are criminals we're dealing with, so they're not going to follow the rules. And that's why you see basically the bar acting like a criminal organization. And the courts. Look, this whole foreclosure mess is going to cause, on all these guys, I don't know how they're planning on bearing it. I see they called in Greenberg Traub already to start with this Florida foreclosure mess. Yeah. So they're going to try to weasel their way out of it again. But again and again.
Well, they're blaming the banks right now, and they've got this guy Tuckman, or not Tuckman. Some lawyer has filed a class action suit on behalf of the foreclosees, I guess, or people that are involved, who is suing the banks. My question has always been, what is the involvement of rogue attorneys in this? And how many of those rogue attorneys are insured by...
Every contract signed, mortgage, bank, loan, everything was written by a law firm.
Right. And then are those lawyers, how many of them are insured by Florida Lawyers Mutual? And is there a reason why Judge Cox decided that only the Florida bar could do anything to prosecute them, and that they were not fair game for the Attorney General of the state of Florida to prosecute?
And the Florida bar has no prosecutorial role.
Well, that's not supposed to be their role, but of course that's the quote from the judge that's their prosecutors. So this whole thing. Hopefully, I have to imagine that at some point in time there's going to be either an upheaval in the media to finally turn tables on this and expose this, and that it's going to take down the hierarchy of the judiciary, and it's
a criminal organization that's usurped the judiciary.
here. There's a lot of good lawyers out there, Les.
Yes, there are.
And you know what? Christine Anderson, this whistleblower in New York, and we should have one here and get so lucky in Florida.
Yeah. Well, they have one. They had this lady that blew the whistle on these foreclosures in Stern's law firm here in Palm Beach County.
And God bless her.
Yeah.
Because what they do to these people, like Christine Anderson, is, you know, the next thing you know, they're trying to threaten her. They're another lady from the ethics department in New York, same thing as the Florida bar, came to testify at Anderson's thing. They levied threats against her, a federal witness going to a federal case. So, you know, even if you're trying to do something good within these departments, the minute you do, you go against the top.
You become the target.
You are a target. That's right. Christine Anderson's the victim. And imagine a whistleblower going to the state of New York's attorney general, and instead of him representing her, he represents the state defendants.
Yeah.
She complains about and fails to bring in anybody to investigate them. In my case, for example, in New York, the attorney, and we'll get to that attorney general thing here in Florida in a second.
Yeah.
Probably be a nice segue into that. But in New York, you know, the attorney general took in my complaint information against 39 New York state defendants. And so he told me, you know, we're looking into it, et cetera, and sent me the old "we're looking into it" letter. Well, when I filed my federal lawsuit, he started representing the 36 or 9 people that I'm suing in New York. And
he's supposed to be the protector of the public, and when you file a complaint, he now becomes the protector of the person you're complaining against.
That's right, and his public integrity unit is the unit that's supposed to investigate. I was told by a federal judge to go to his offices. She sent my case to him directly, hand-delivered, and she and so what he did there was he not only when he can choose to represent the state defendants. I'm not saying that's wrong.
Okay.
What is wrong is when he does that, he has an obligation to say my public integrity unit is now conflicted, or he had to have set up a China wall, which he never did.
Right.
And
something to allow him to change sides and protect your original complaint.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And he didn't do anything like that. So what did he do? He became part of the RICO organization by committing the crime of obstruction. So he blocked due process, and he covered the state employees illegally, in my case and Anderson's, and we're all pushing to knock him out. By the way, if we knock out in New York the attorney general from representing those 36 defendants, all 36 of, and by the way, he's representing them personally and professionally on public dime in New York.
Wow.
Which is, it's a mind-boggling.
That's unbelievable, on taxpayers' dollars.
Representing against a whistleblower.
Yeah.
Sitting across from her in a court and failing to call in a non-conflicted investigator, meaning if you're going to take the role of defending the state of defendants, great, but I need somebody now who's non-conflicted and not your office to be handling the investigation. When you fail to do that under Public Office Law 17B2 or 2B in New York, you've committed a conflict. That conflict obstructs justice. In a federal case, it's Title 18 obstruction. He's done it both in the state court and the federal. So I'm filing criminal charges against him for those obstructions, which in a RICO makes him part of the whole criminal organization. And that's what you need to see here in Florida. This is a criminal organization of law firms.
Okay, well, I'm going to hold on one second,
Okay.
Eliot. My guest is Eliot Bernstein. Iviewit TV is the website, and it's IVIEWIT.TV website. If you want to look at what the information is on his website, I want to refer you to our website, which is disbarthefloridabar.com. We have interviewed Eliot in the past. This is a follow-up to those interviews. Eliot is, as you can tell from the conversation, he's a knowledgeable person. He is above average intelligence, and he knows what's going on, and he has, done everything in his power to overcome the racketeering at this level. And it's an amazing thing to me how infected this arrangement is, how one part covers another, how they protect each other, because if it unravels, they all go down. And of course, we're talking about some very, very powerful and important people throughout the country, not just in the state of Florida, but all over the country. So we'll be back with Eliot in a second. I want to remind you that this program is DisBar, the Florida Bar. It airs every day from 2 to 3 p.m. right here on The Biz. And we bring to light stories of individuals who have experience with the judiciary, with the bars, with rogue attorneys, rogue judges. This is something that's going on a regular, everyday basis, and it's affecting all of our lives. There is a tremendous shift in wealth where when this kind of activity occurs, the wealth is shifted to the attorneys and taken from the citizens, the lay citizens. We'll be back with Eliot Bernstein. We're going to talk about Florida and the Attorney General here in Florida, and we're going to have that discussion. Don't go away. My name is Les Winston, and I host DisBar, the Florida Bar, right here on The Biz in South Florida.
In Florida, all other professionals except lawyers are governed by the Department of Business and Professional Regulation.
And increasingly people are coming to this conclusion that the judicial branch of government is itself the most dangerous branch of government.
There's a system out of control. There's no more check and balance.
Only lawyers regulate themselves through the Florida Bar. This has created a very dangerous good old boys club and a lot of rotten apples.
Yeah, they tell the other branches what they can do.
The United States Trustees Program is the largest organized criminal element in the world.
They allowed somebody to put a bomb in my car and attempt to murder my 3 children.
If some real investigative writer would ever do a study on which lawyers were ever disciplined and for what, and which ones were not, I think they'd see that there are certain members of the bar that are favored over others.
Tune in each weekday from 2 o'clock to 3 p.m. and listen to stories of individuals who have been affected by the corruption of the Florida Bar. We want you to be aware of the problem that we have with this disciplinary agency. Join us every weekday, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. right here on The Biz. And we're back. My guest this afternoon is Eliot Bernstein. Eliot, before the break, we were talking about the Attorney General. What is the Attorney General's role in all of this, in Florida in particular, let's say?
Well, in Florida, they haven't really done anything. Like in New York, their role is to cover it up. Mm-hmm. And part of that, we just applied to McCollum's office to be part of the grand jury. I mean, they want a public integrity grand jury to look into judges, et cetera. I've got a $1 trillion lawsuit, a liability to the state of Florida that they're very cognizant of. I sent him the information, and, I don't know what he sent me. He sent me the referral to Charlie Chris, who then referred me to McCollum. And
so it's going around the executive circles.
Right, and it's the ping pong game of hot potato, basically. Uh-huh. And
if you had the power to choose what should be done in this situation, what would the governor or what would the Attorney General do that you would think would be the right thing to do?
Call in a federal monitor to monitor the courts, the Supreme Court, all of these plants. Look at the crimes, how, for example, regulations were dropped for the Stanford Bank. Mm-hmm. By Greenberg Traug, how these law firms are penetrating into government offices.
Who would be a federal monitor, though? Isn't a federal monitor going to be somebody in the judiciary? Is it like a shepherd or some other?
It would be a federal agency brought in to monitor the Florida courts and investigate them. See, I don't think you can do anything in Florida. Meaning, you're out of luck in this state. Because it's top down. The Supreme Court is criminal.
Right.
Jorge Labarga threw an election in the United States. He got elevated for that from a civil court in West Palm Beach with absolutely no qualifications to be a Supreme Court guy. But because of his cover-up and the Iviewit cover-up that he did, he got elevated. Mm-hmm. That's the game they play. Because in the criminal organization, if you do crime, you're not disciplined, you're rewarded. Mm-hmm. So by these lawyers, and I wouldn't even really, I've said it before on your show, these aren't lawyers. These are just criminals. They're basic, run-of-the-mill criminals. Anybody who's got a law degree who figures out that, hey, if we take over the legal system and don't enforce any of the laws, we could do a lot of crime. Mm-hmm. Well, look what's happened in our country, and it's all lawyers. And none of the lawyers are getting admonished. And we find in New York that where Wall Street lawyers are supposed to be regulated, that there's a cleaner in the House of Ethics cleaning and whitewashing complaints against all the lawyers that could be held accountable for the meltdown. And all of that meltdown and all these synthetic CDOs that were written and all this crap were all written by lawyers.
Well, that's what nobody wants to face up to. They all are blaming
they
corporate
all
America.
Want to face up to it, but nobody can do anything about it.
Well, no, but there's this issue that corporatism or the corporate world is corrupt. Bull. It's not the corporate world that's corrupt without having somebody advise it how to be corrupt. And that's what's going on.
And actually writing the documents, the instruments.
Yeah.
It's not like they're passive advice here that says, hey, you might be a little bit shady on reporting that this way or that way.
Right.
These are the guys writing the CDOs. These are the guys writing these mortgages.
Yeah.
That say there's no income verification, so tell people to lie about their income.
Right. And
who thought? And the lawyers didn't know that?
Who came up with that? Exactly. How did that happen?
It was all lawyers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we look at what's going on at the regulatory bodies. Look at the lawyers. At Madoff, as I said, the regulators are all from law firms. So if you're running a Ponzi and you're a law firm, and these Ponzi's, I call them law firm money laundering schemes. Because from all their stolen money, they put them into these Ponzi's.
Right.
And I don't really think they're Ponzi's. I think they are the laundering arm of the criminal organization. Remember, when you got this much dirty money, a laundering machine just doesn't cut it here.
All right, listen, I want to break here, Eliot. We're going to come back to you after this break, but we want to air a rap song from an anonymous party that I've contributed to, and I want to air it here before the show ends. So don't go away.
Okay.
This is the way it's supposed to work.
Yes, it's a problem we must face it right now, in this place. Get rid of the bars, stop all the corrupt, end it right away. Yes, I mean it rough. I'm sick of all the flaws, just follow the laws. All of y'all fake, just like Santa Claus. Time to fix the system, yes, I demand. End the Florida bar, it's our time to expand. You can try and see it happening to you, but you won't know the pain till it comes right through. Corruption will bite you real hard, yeah, it's true. They can take your whole life savings, rob you, dominate you, screw you, leave you without a clue, freeze you, they're cold, built in the devil's mold, all ages, young and old, lawyers and corruption, go hand in hand like 9/11 and destruction, the hook will say it all, about how I'd like to see the Florida ball fall.
This is the way it's supposed to work. For example, if you have a complaint against an attorney, you file the complaint with the Florida Bar. It's a grievance that you lodge against the attorney. The Florida Bar gives that attorney an opportunity to answer the grievance. Based on the answer from the attorney and based on your complaint, they determine whether there's probable cause for that to move forward. Once the Florida Bar determines that there's no probable cause, there is no authority above that you can go to appeal that ruling. It is the most dangerous entity in the state. It is run by King Jack Harkness, who has been there for almost 40 years. He has been able to hold these two positions, one as the head of the Florida Bar, which is an arm of the Supreme Court and a government agency, and also sits as a member of the board of directors of a private for-profit insurance company, which insures lawyers against malpractice, which is owned and operated by members of the Florida Bar. That is the most significant conflict of interest there could be, and nobody has done a thing about it.
Yes, it's a problem we must face it right now, in this place.
Now, we have been collecting sworn statements that the individuals are willing to bear testimony against the Florida Bar officials for obstruction of justice and or the failure to provide honest services. I call it the judiciary against whistleblower success. Jaws. Dum, 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 dum. It's the sharks. They smell blood in the water and they will do everything in their power to get the carcass. The whistleblowers are now coming out against the Florida Bar.
I'm sick of all the flaws, just follow the laws. All of y'all fake, just like Santa Claus. Time to fix the system, yes, I demand. End the Florida Bar, it's our time to expand.
The Florida Bar has either obstructed justice or has committed honest services fraud. It's a government agency that is not doing what it's supposed to do for the people of Florida. Now, the grand jury is a process that was a way for the average citizen to go to other average citizens and tell the story of what was done to them by governmental agencies or by agencies, and you would have an opportunity before the grand jury to testify, to air your grievances, to be heard. That has been derailed.
Dominate you, screw you, leave you without a clue. Freeze you, they're cold. Built in the devil's mold. All ages, young and old. Lawyers and corruption go hand in hand like 9/11 and destruction.
Governor Christ, he said we need to have a grand jury to ferret out corruption in government, corruption in agencies. Corruption has to be ferreted out. Well, here we are bringing to the governor, bringing to the attorney general, the grand jury, the opportunity for them to ferret out corruption, and they're turning a blind eye because there are gatekeepers protecting their process.
Yes, it's a problem we must face.
That's why it's the judiciary against whistleblower success.
Face it right now, in its place.
This is a mockery of the judicial process in the state of Florida, and it has to stop. Who has the cojones to be able to take on this system? This is DisBar, the Florida Bar. I am your host, Les Winston. I come to you every day from 2 to 3 p.m. here on The Biz. The Florida Bar is the most corrupt organization in the state of Florida. Corrupt. Conflicted. John Harkness, the executive director of the Florida Bar, should have been thrown out long ago. He's affecting commerce in the state of Florida. He's violating antitrust laws, violating honest services. He's violating the principles of good governance in this state with complete and total impunity. It's time for this to stop.
Yes, it's a problem we must face. Face it right now, in its place.
Jesse Diner, who was the president of the Florida Bar, said, well, 1% are rotten apples. Well, 1% of 70,000 is 700. Rogue attorneys can do a huge amount of damage, and nothing gets done to them because you can't get past the Florida Bar's inability to correct the problem. The Florida Bar is toothless only when it comes to your complaint, but if a powerful attorney makes a complaint against another attorney as a whistleblower, that attorney needs to watch their back. This is a nightmare in the state of Florida. John Harkness is a corrupt official in the state of Florida. He needs to be tried, operating a government agency and working for a private for-profit insurance company. I'm saying it to you right now, I will testify against John Harkness. This is like running the mob. We have racketeering going on at its highest level in the Florida Bar.
You can try and see it happening to you, but you won't know the pain till it comes right through. Corruption will bite you real hard, yeah, it's true. They can take your whole life savings, rob you, dominate you, screw you, leave you without a clue, freeze you. They're cold.
When are we going to get some justice? And the Supreme Court of Florida is sitting on their hands because they're afraid of the Florida Bar. They must be, because they wouldn't be operating as if they have no responsibility for it. The Florida Bar needs to be removed as the disciplinary arm for lawyers in the state. At least the head of the Florida Bar needs to be removed, and all the people that are under him who are corrupted by his activity. And it has to stop.
My job is to make sure that you do your job. So my jurisdiction's pretty much in your face.
The eyes of the nation are on us right now.
There you have the rap song of the year, folks. This is the theme of DisBar, the Florida Bar. My guest in the early part of the show was Eliot Bernstein for the most of the show, and we're going to continue this interview on our next show. Join us again tomorrow, same time, same station here on The Biz for DisBar, the Florida Bar.